Ben Kaplan is Senior Vice President of Global Critical Facilities for Turner Construction. Some of you may have expected Peter Davern, who went in for emergency back surgery Thursday afternoon. And so we certainly send him our warm wishes and prayers for a speedy recovery. We understand he's doing well, but obviously he wasn't going to hop on an airplane and head west. So Ben has stepped up, and we're grateful for that. He joined the Turner Construction Company after graduating from Drexel with a BS in civil engineering. Early in his years, he advanced through the various operation assignments, worked on some of Turner's very significant projects. In 2017, became a Senior Vice President of Global Critical Facilities, where he leads a staff of over 1,000 data center construction professionals, completing 50 projects a year in 23 states with annual revenues approaching $4 billion. He doesn't have time to be here, but like most industry leaders, he takes time for what's important. Let's show him our appreciation right now by welcoming him to the microphone. Ben.
Thank you, Greg. On behalf of Peter, he wanted to apologize for two things. The first was that he just couldn't be here, as Greg mentioned why. And the second thing he wanted to apologize was for sending me. So I will do the best that I can. For those of you who have seen Peter present, it's pretty special, and to follow somebody like Joe is pretty intimidating. The good news about that, though, is I think a lot of what Joe talked about, we can continue to build on those themes for the next couple of minutes. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. I live in the tech world. We call that Monday, right? And is it here to stay? I think so. As Greg mentioned, I've been at this for over 30 years, and between early in my career, looking at the commercial markets in New York in the 1990s, and same thing in Philadelphia. Then we saw the NASDAQ and the tech bubble of the 2000 range, and then we have the financial crisis. And then we get to the last couple of years, incredibly volatile, incredibly dynamic. But I have to say, the last few years, to me, have been unbelievable. And to some extent, it's been the scariest part of my career, but also the most rewarding. What we've had to deal with and how we've come through it, incredibly daunting, but just how good does it feel to be where we all are as an industry today? So really, really I can't sleep at night very often, but I am energized by what we do every day. I'd like to start off with a look, what we've been asked to do is give a little bit of perspective. As a builder, Turner is a $16 billion a year company. We focus on quite a few markets: commercial, industrial, aviation, healthcare, sports, and data centers. So we have a pretty good perspective of the overall market. So I'll share a little bit of what our thoughts are. I know there's a lot of expertise in this room, and if I say something you disagree with, let us know. But I'll just kind of share how we've been looking at it. First of all, the market is busy from a construction perspective. We are as an industry, our backlogs are at all-time highs. We see that trend continuing even in the face of recession. There will certainly be soft spots in the market. I think the most obvious is commercial construction. Thinking about it, are people going to go back to the office? Do we need to have offices for our folks at the same level that we had before? Will those offices be different? What does that do for our inventory? Do we need new buildings? Do we need to reposition these buildings either for new types of spaces, or do we need to look at, can an old office building be a life sciences facility? Can it be a residential building? I look to our own space. Turner just renovated. We just moved. 30 years, we were at 375 Hudson Street in Soho in Manhattan. And we renovated that space many times. And usually the focus of our renovation was how many more cubicles can we jam into the space? How many more people can we get in there? Well, our new space at 66 Hudson Street in Hudson Yards is completely different. The focus of that space is how do we make our office a place that when people have to commute an hour and a half to get to the office, because that's pretty typical when you work in New York City, that it's worth them being there. We talk about, we need people in space, we need people in the office so they can collaborate. We can have the unintentional, what do we call it, the casual collisions, right? How do we, well, our space wasn't set up for that. That happened, but that wasn't how we set it up. And this space is. We have a library type space where you can quietly do work. We also have spaces that are geared towards collaboration, a lot less about sitting at a cubicle, but really creating an environment that you can go into. That's a big change from where we were just a couple years ago. And how that's going to impact the commercial construction market, I don't think we know. Every major business district is going to have to deal with it, and some districts, like when you look at the tech world where some of our clients are, it's really having a large impact on what we're going to build and when we're going to build it. So that's a soft spot. Healthcare. Wow. Healthcare has gone through a lot in the last couple of years, not the least of which is incredible impact on their revenues and their profitability. But at the same time, we see some real bright spots there. Cancer treatments and the facilities to support that are really on the upswing. Behavioral facilities are also on the upswing. So we see healthcare as stable, maybe a little soft, but moving forward. Industrial, and I'll just use a very wide definition of industrial, is off the charts. In the near term, has been previously, and where we're going really has us excited. We look at things like the conversion of internal combustion engine cars to electric vehicles and what that's spurring, how fast that transition is going to occur, the supply chains that's going to create. So we all hear about battery. Well, not just the battery manufacturing themselves, but all of the component parts that go into that supply chain. Just tremendous, tremendous opportunity. We look at things like the chip fabrication. There may be some short-term concerns in that market relative to profitability at the moment, but when you look at the larger trends, first of all, doubling chip demand by the year 2030, excuse me, looking at onshoring of that capability back into the United States, and then the government-inspired dynamic of the CHIPS Act. We really feel strongly that that's another really strong spot in the marketplace. The thing about projects like the EV battery and the chips are they tend to be massive projects, to the point where when you drop projects into a market that start with a B in terms of the cost, it affects the regional markets. You can't drop $1 billion project into a market and not really look at, maybe here in Texas it doesn't happen as much, but you go into the central US or the Southeast and you drop a project of that scale in place, it affects a multi-state area and really the dynamics of overall construction. But again, we see that as really positive. Our stadium work is back, surprisingly. Didn't think that would happen, but you know what? People are getting back into public venues. There was a moment where we thought aviation was dead forever, right? Well, everybody who came to the airport here probably was packed, right? Not a lot of extra seats. Aviation is exploding. So when we look at the fact that we've been operating at a pretty high level in the current moment, and all of these trends in front of us, we feel pretty good about the need for construction and the future of construction. But what are the headwinds? What are we up against? A couple things to touch on here. First of all, unprecedented demand, and really here it's from the new entrants. It's the battery plant manufacturers. It's going to be the chip guys really engaging. It's other industries that are going to be reshoring because we've looked at our supply chains and said, wow, we can't, they're too fragile. We have to rethink what those supply chains are. So that opportunity is going to be a big issue. Force majeure. Funny, go off on a little bit of a tangent, maybe a story. In summer of 2019, my wife Patty and I were on vacation in Moscow, Russia. So you want to talk about volatility and ambiguity? Go right there, right? Who goes to vacation in Russia today? Americans are vacationing in Russia. It's just not going to happen. But while we were there, we were at the Metropole Hotel in Moscow at the lobby bar. And it was a really cool bar, and they had like tarot cards that you order your drinks from, and you pick your drink, and they take it over the bar. And Patty and I are talking, and I'm watching the bartender make up these drinks, and there's all kinds of colors involved, and there's smoke involved. It was great. I see him put it on a tray, and he walks behind the bar. Huge crash. Uh-oh. About a moment later, the lobby bar manager comes out, a Russian woman, speaking with an impeccable British accent, which I won't try to recreate because that would be really embarrassing. But she says, "Sir, madam, there's been a force majeure event. Your drinks will be delayed." I got really excited. I started texting everybody back in the US. I didn't care what time it was. This was my first force majeure event. I had been negotiating force majeure language and contracts for 20 years, never pulled the trigger. So I had to tell everybody. Well, my God, how that changed, right? Single point of failure in the supply chain. Some of the things we've seen, how do you even prepare, how do you even think about them? I had a team call me and say, hey Ben, we're getting ready to put this roof on the building. It's a 1 million square foot roof and we can't move forward. Well, why not? Well, we can't get the roofing mastic. Oh, what's the matter? The factory can't produce it fast enough? What's going on? So, no, they have plenty of mastic. We can't get the metal buckets to put the mastic in to get it to the site. How do you plan on a single point of failure like that? Crazy. But that's what we've been dealing with in the environment of the last few years. Escalation in inflation, it was incredible what we all had to live through in the last year, so I think it's stabilized a little bit. But man, this time last year in 22, felt like there was no end in sight for how fast things were moving. It was crushing our supply chains. People who had committed to numbers that they couldn't honor because it would put them out of business. How do you respond to that? Cybersecurity, social issues. And then I think there are some things that are structural and going to be with us for a long time. The diminishing supply of skilled labor. See, a lot of our skilled labor partners, organized labor partners are here today, and that's terrific. We're going to talk a bunch about that. But we've seen this coming for a long time. We've known for 20 years that we were not replacing our craftspeople fast enough. And we talked about doing something about it. We really didn't do much about it, and now it's here, and we have a challenge. Sustainability and resiliency. That's here to stay with us. How are we going to deal with ESG type issues and requirements and build that into our process? Not all these things are negative. They're just things we have to figure out how to work through. And of course, in the short term, increased cost of money, tightening credit. I mean, you can see the other things on here. These are all the things that we're dealing with every single day. So really, where we are is how do we have mitigation strategies that deal with this? And I can't thank Joe enough because he's going to queue up when I hit the next button here. I think when you try and operationalize what Joe just said for the last couple of minutes, it's how do we prepare? This is how we're approaching this. We're looking at all this and saying, how do we prepare for what we know and then position ourselves to manage through what we don't? I think that's how he described the donut hole, right? This, if I would have known, I would have put a donut on the sheet. But that's everything we're going to talk about here really kind of goes to this concept of how do we manage, how do we prepare to manage what we don't know. I think we need to recognize that some of the things we've done in the past are just not going to work for us in the future. So where can you focus? This is trying to get a little specific, and I think this can go for all of us. This may be how Turner's approaching it, but I think everybody can look at these kind of things. Firstly, active caring for our workforce, really focusing on our workforce, creating a place that is respectful and inclusive for where our folks go to work. And this goes to that physical safety that we were talking about, and the emotional or psychological safety are equally as important. That's something that we've recognized. We have to create that spaces on our construction site. Another thing we need to look at proactively and where to focus is diversity of both contracting and workforce. I struggled with this one, how I wanted to say this a little bit. I've been personally involved in some form or function in this space for 20 years. The impact that we've had in that 20 years just isn't, we're just not that impactful. There are some really good success stories with regard to this, but not near enough. We haven't moved our industry far enough or fast enough. We have to do better. We have to look at diversity in our contracting and our workforce, and really look at things that move the needle and lead to sustainable change and sustainable difference. And the last thing I would say on this area is workforce development. Actively engaging on bringing new people into our workforce. We have had some great success recently, especially in the short term, and we've really tried to focus on this with our partners in organized labor, really stepping to the table and helping with this. But here's the thing, folks. If somebody comes out to a construction site and it's not respectful, it's not inclusive, and they don't see people who look like them if we're trying to pull from new labor pools, they're not going to stay. So unless we get those first two items right, we're never going to be able to recruit and develop the workforce. Another thing we can focus on, this idea of environmental, social, and governance. What are your targets? What are your goals? What are the commitments you're willing to make as an organization? How are you going to get there? How do you make sure you actually hit those targets? And then you have to look broader and say, what are our clients doing? What are the supply chain? What are they saying is important? What are their targets? And how do we support each other in reaching those targets? And that's going to start to go to a partnership concept. We're going to talk about it in a few minutes. And then from our perspective, we look at that and say, that's not the other job or a secondary job. We're investing resources full-time to help support this because we feel that's the only way we could get there. Supply chain. We really learned a lot about the fragility of our supply chain in the last couple of years. Looking at how we do procurement, and I'll talk a little bit about risk and things, and how we may need to think a little bit differently there. Looking about what our sourcing models are. How do we do that? But more importantly, what is our market intelligence? What can we glean from each other and bring forward for decision-making on supply chains that we haven't really done in the past? You know, we have information, we've processed it, but we really haven't been great at that. And what we've learned recently is in such a VUCA environment, we need to be great at understanding what's going on in the supply chain. So really looking at that market intelligence, partnering with everybody to pull information forward, processing it in a way that we can deliver, we can talk to our clients about how it affects their business outcomes. And that's what we need to be focusing on. That's what we're working on. And then I think we all need to look at what Joe was talking about a little bit. How do you get ahead of it? I'm going to start referring to something called, this is where the creativity comes in. I'd like to start thinking about proactive creativity as opposed to reactive creativity. We run into a problem. There's no industry better than responding to challenge and figuring it out after it hits. But how do we get in front of that and really try and make a difference? So, for instance, some of the things that we're looking at is we have an engineering group. We're not here to compete with any of the designers in the room at all. We're here to bring the design perspective through a contractor and help with things like peer review and just help clients make better decisions. That's an investment we're making. As we've looked at supply chains, are really looking deeply at fourth-party logistics and how we manage the movement of materials to projects. Because as we look at it and think about it, how do we move from building our projects in the field, stick building our projects in the field, to making our projects more and more points of assembly? That takes a different mindset, that takes a different approach. That's the kind of thing that we're trying to look at. I want to talk a little bit about risk. You know, we have a great industry. We're all really good at shifting risk, pushing it downstream, getting people to sign up for things, and really being as aggressive as we can of pushing that to somebody else. That's not necessarily a good thing. You know what? We were good at it. It worked for us for a long time. But in this environment, with this much volatility, I'm going to put forth that maybe it's time to look at a change, right? Because the traditional risk shifting is away from partnership, and it doesn't incentivize project success. We're forced to protect our individual interests, right? Which means we're not focused on our clients' business outcomes out of necessity. And you know, let's face it, I don't ever want to walk into a client's office or have somebody walk into my office and say, hey, we're not delivering that project on time. To go to a pharma client, we're not going to be able to produce that medicine on time because of whatever, but don't worry, there's somebody downstream we have recourse against, and I'm going to blame them, right? That doesn't help our clients get to the business outcomes that we need. So where we look at this is to say, how do we move from transactional relationships to really changing the dynamic in our business and get into true partnership, transparency, cultural alignment, collaboration, and really, you know, this bottom piece here, if you look at the slide, is really focusing on the business outcomes instead of the individual risk mitigation. How do we create that environment? And for us, we look at that and say that's end-to-end partnerships. And there's 4 elements to the end-to-end partnerships. The first is the business partnership, and that's the relationship. The second one is that right environment. How do we work with our construction and craft professionals and really bring them and create an environment where they can succeed and want to be part of our business? And then we have to look at deployment models. This goes to strategy. This is some of what Joe talked about a little bit. How do you get ahead? Where do we find that proactive creativity instead of that reactive creativity? And then there's that risk allocation. How do we balance that? How do we hold people responsible for everything they should be held responsible for, but allow them the luxury of not having to protect their interests for things they can't control? So let's talk about deployment. Prefab, and what I really think we should aspire to is off-site manufacturing. You know, prefab is near-site prefabrication, where you have your electrician take the same electricians that would be on site and work in a tent or a warehouse nearby and move stuff on. That really doesn't move the needle. It doesn't move the labor force. It doesn't really change how we do business. But how do we work through the process so that we are truly doing off-site construction? To me, I look at our industry, and if you think about it, design bid build process, a client sets expectations, a designer establishes that design, and then the rest of us in the construction supply chain reverse engineer that product so we can build it in the field, right? We have to change that so that our means and methods, our means of production are built into the design from the beginning. And it's exciting, it's challenging, and it changes how all of us interact in the process. Another thing is looking at target value design, and I know this comes out in IPD, and there's probably folks in this room who know more about that than I do, but the key here is how do we define value? Schedule certainty, safety, cost, quality, right? Really looking at what value means so that we can get aligned around that. I cannot say more about the respectful and workplace and the right environment. Those of you who know Turner, this is a big theme. You know, you talk about what Peter Davern's legacy will be long after he's gone and nobody remembers his name. I think this will be Peter's legacy. This is the thing he's focused our entire organization on. And then flexibility. This is around, to me, in this context, I mean this around governance. even at Turner, we have a lot of this. There's a lot of processes, bureaucracy around work gets awarded, how things get done. And sometimes that doesn't support the best business outcomes for our clients. We have to get better at that. We have to think that. We have to reevaluate how we do that. So, again, doubling down on this idea of end-to-end partnerships. What does that look like? It's about a decade ago now, almost to the day actually, a client came to us and said, we want to be the owner of choice. And what would that mean to you, Ben, for us to be the owner of choice? So we spent a lot of time thinking about it, talking about it, and really what it came down to is a couple things that really matter from our clients relative to us. First is transparency of the pipeline and the needs. It's one thing somebody says, well, hey, Ben, when do you have capacity? Like, where are you going to have capacity? Where are you going to have people available? That doesn't help me serve your interests in the best fashion. You being able to say, here's where I'm going to need you, and here's when, and us being able to allocate that and get those resources to where you need them allows us to be much more effective. Instead of reacting to where you say, hey, I got to be in Cleveland. Let's figure out how to get in Cleveland. If I know a year ahead of time I need to be in Cleveland, or maybe need to be in Cleveland, because a lot of times our clients don't know, right? But at least I can be thinking about that. I can get resources there. We are resource constrained, so the ability to have transparency there really matters. That goes to early engagement. And I'll say timely decision making is another thing that's become a really big critical issue that we've all seen recently. And the example of that is we're moving forward. Can't tell you how many times in the last year or two, hey, this piece of equipment's about to show up, but we can't get the widget. We can't deliver it. It's going to be 6 months before we can get that. I got a friend here. But you know what? There's another product over here that we think will be able to, we can drop it in, and you know what? It'll just cost us a couple weeks. Some of our clients are like, tell me about it. Let's get the team together. 24 hours later, we have a decision. We're off and running. Crisis averted. We move on to the next one, next challenge. Others, wait a minute. Let's talk about that. We have to think about it. Decisions can't be made. And what we're then trying to do is unwind a 6-month delay. So client of choice, when they have to, where we as a team can support them and give them good business intelligence, can make timely decisions. And then when we run into those situations, who are the clients that say, that's your problem, or the clients that say, let's roll up our sleeves and deal with this? That's what the client of choice looks like. The designer of choice. First thing is alignment with the owner and the owner's goals and focusing on total outcome. For our design partners in the room, a couple areas I really think that make a difference in being the designer of choice is flexibility to support the dynamic workplace. And by that I mean just what I was talking about a moment ago. When we need to shift that spec quickly, we know you spend a lot of time and effort designing around that other piece of equipment, but we need help now to evaluate this situation. Are you able to respond quickly? Again, focused on the owner's outcome, give good business advice to that client about whether or not we can take that option. That to me is a sign of the designer of choice. Another one is, as we look at some of these alternate deployment models and we introduce new strategies, just being flexible and willing to support them, right? So if we're going to do a design for manufacturing and assembly, and it changes the way we put together the design, just being willing to support that, right? Contractor of choice. Again, alignment with the owner's goals, really understanding what's important and how we can move the needle. I had a job once. I turned over a job to a pharmaceutical client once a month early, and it was on time. On time. Saved him $1 million, great quality product. Sat at the meeting, said, "Isn't this wonderful?" And he said, "You're giving me back $1 million?" "Yeah, isn't that great?" Said, "If we would have spent $1 million, how much earlier could you have delivered the project?" Maybe a month. But there was no reason to. Everything was going great. Ben, to build the first pill that came off that line cost $1 billion. The second one cost 10 cents. You didn't do much for me giving me back $1 million. Right? So really understanding what the business outcomes for our clients are is really important about being a good contractor of choice. Transparency, creativity, and flexibility. And this is where I was talking over and over again about this idea of proactive creativity. How do we manage for the things we know and prepare for the things we don't? And then, of course, I will go back to this over and over again, treating the workforce with respect. Trade partner and vendors. The true transparency of what's going on. Don't tell us what we need to hear in order to say yes. Tell us what really is happening around your risk. Tell us what's really happening around your capacity so that we can work together to make good business decisions. Again, focus on that total outcome, and then really supporting those new deployment models. This is a big one for trade partners. As we look at more of prefab and then hopefully off-site manufacturing, many of our partners are trying to move upstream in that. They're converting some of their capacity to try and become true manufacturers. Or if not, very good at prefab at the very least. Some partners are not, right? They're going to be more at the point of assembly. Understanding that, willing to be focused on that, understand, okay, a lot more of our projects are going to be either owner furnished or contractor furnished, and be willing to support that in the field. Those are trade partners and vendors of choice. And then how do we become the project site of choice? Our skilled craftspeople are in demand, and they will be for the foreseeable future, right? How do we make sure the site is respectful and inclusive? You know, at the next break, we're going to walk out of here and we're going to go over to the restroom. And we all know it's going to be really clean. It's going to be well stocked with everything we need. When we want to wash our hands, there's soap and there's hot water. Would you expect anything less? Of course not. But then you go to a construction site. Who here wants to use a restroom on most construction sites? We let that exist. We tell our skilled craftspeople, it's okay for you to be treated this way. No. They should have a safe and clean environment. They should have an environment. The restrooms should be like the restrooms here. The break tents should be warm. They should have microwaves. There should be hot and cold running water so they can clean up. Why would we expect or allow anything different to happen? And we really need to show our appreciation for the craftspeople that they are. Critically important. Because you know what? If you don't think it's the right thing to do, just do it because you have to. Because you know what? People come to our sites and they don't see that. They're going to go somewhere where they are respected and treated well. So when we look at this in the aggregate, it's really, this is how we're kind of, it's end-to-end partnerships. It starts with the owner and it goes right down to that carpenter putting up wood or studs in our facility. It's end-to-end partnerships are all of these things, and really where we want to get to is you want to be everybody's first choice. Everybody wants to be on this team. Everybody wants to be part of this. That's how we see end-to-end partnership. And if I go back to those sort of starting point of how do we manage that, it becomes productive business partnerships. It becomes a commitment to the right environment. And I say commitment because there's no such thing as just setting it up and getting it right and it'll take care of itself. We refer to that as a sandcastle. You set it up, you get it started, and if you don't watch out, the waves will come in and erode it, so you got to be constantly on top of that. Reimagining our deployment models, and then looking at risk allocation, just make sure it's balanced. And when I say this, I'm not saying, I need to be held responsible for everything in my control. Those known knowns, if you will, absolutely. And our supply chains absolutely need to be taking that risk. But then how do we look at some of the broader, what is it here, VUCA, ambiguity? It'd be nice if we could take ambiguity and assign it to somebody else, but that will not get us the business outcomes we need. So really looking at that piece. We hope And what we're pushing for, and I'd ask you all to think about a little bit, is right now we're in this incredibly VUCA environment. I don't know if that's actually going to become a word or not, VUCA. That's the environment we live in, and I believe we're going to be in this state for quite a while. But at the end of it, if things stabilize, do we want to go back to where we were, or do we want to really look at a new way of looking at the relationships and this idea of maybe end-to-end partnerships? So that's kind of our view of the construction world and approach to it, and I hope it sort of synergizes a little bit with what Joe said earlier. You know, talked a little bit maybe about some practical ways to look at the donut hole and then define what the donut hole is. So now I guess we're up to Q&A, Greg, right?
We are. First of all, let's show our appreciation. Gosh, where to start? There are pages and pages of these. Talk to us about what you mean by diversity in contracting. Has the old way of contracting died?
What I'm talking about is diverse representation in contracting here, just to be clear. And historically, the way we've dealt with this is we set percentage requirements. But the problem with what we've done is, okay, we have a 15% requirement. I hire an electrician. Electrician, how are you going to get the 15% requirement? Oh, I'm going to hire these other people, and here's the 15%. We check the box, we move on. We do very little to actually develop that 15%, the contractors that make up that 15%, to grow their businesses, to make them viable, quite frankly, to become competitors with us someday, or for that electrician, you know, to be a competitor on some products with that other electrician. We sort of filled quotas, but didn't really build capacity. My opinion, some of you may disagree, but that's kind of the way Turner's approaching it, is we have to look at this now and say, how do we look at diversity for impact? When we talk about diversity in the workforce, it's really about having, well, first of all, make our construction sites a place, and our offices, where people can be their authentic selves. I wish Peter was here for this part because he does a great job on it. But basically, doesn't matter what your religion is, the color of your skin, or your sexual orientation, there's a place for you on our sites. How do we get to that? How do we make that real? And especially now when we have to attract people from all sorts of different labor pools, if we can't make our job sites safe in the full definition of that word, we're never going to get the labor we need to build our projects.
Talk to us more about fourth-party logistics. Isn't that essentially off-site modularization?
The fourth-party logistics I'm referring to here is, as we pull more and more elements out of the construction on the site, we have more and more sub-assemblies. There is a pretty sophisticated logistics model that has to be deployed in order to be able to efficiently construct the building. So instead of just bringing a bunch of stuff to site, for instance, and we put it together a piece at a time, if we're building our projects basically as a series of sub-assemblies, every one of those assemblies has to show up at exactly the right time, in the right order, on the right truck, in the right place in the truck. Because what we've seen is we get incredibly efficient when we do this. And we're doing a lot of this in the data center world. We're incredibly efficient, but if you mess up that supply chain, if you mess up the logistics, the whole thing falls apart. So you have to, this is another level of skill and control that just we haven't really had in the industry, and that's why we're investing so heavily in it.
You mentioned new markets such as the battery markets, the chip market, the data centers, et cetera. Did you see that coming? And if so, what else do you see coming down the road behind this?
Okay. Chips have been with us for a while, so I think it's the expansion of the chip market. Data centers have become a huge business for us. We knew it was coming, but we had no idea how big it was going to be. And we managed to get ourselves in the right place at the right time. I think when it comes to digital infrastructure, we're just getting started. I'm going to say, I think the OpenAI chat GPI announcement last November, we're going to all look back at that and say, well, remember when Steve Jobs got up here and showed us the iPhone and we had no idea what it was or what it would mean to us? and it changed our lives. I'm pretty sure that announcement in November is going to be of the same level. And if you just go and look at what Microsoft has said since then, look at what Google has said since then. So that one's going to move the needle. When it came to battery and EV, about a year and a half ago, we were in a leadership meeting and somebody basically asked that question, what's next? And I said, EV and mobility and battery is going to be the next big thing. I'm not sure what I got left in my quiver. I'm not sure what's next after this, but I have a feeling it could be the battery production now is supporting EV, but as that technology evolves, there's going to be implications and uses for those batteries far beyond EV, and that could be the next big thing for us all.
You use the term proactive creativity. There's certainly a need for technological revolution in our business. What does Turner mean by proactively being creative? How does that work?
Again, it's focused on how do we position ourselves as best as possible for what we don't know. Right? I don't know exactly how the conversion to a pre-manufactured, off-site manufacturing is going to be, but we understand that this logistics supply chain is incredibly important. So that's an area where we're investing because what we've realized is as we've started to do it, we've seen more and more uses for it. And we're solving more and more, we're solving problems we didn't know we had, and we're able to respond quicker to problems that come at us. So that's an example in that regard. And really looking at that and trying to see, you look at something as simple as cyber security. How do we help our owners, our clients, work with them to protect their confidential information? How do we protect the financials and the flow of cash in this kind of environment? Putting people in place. We have a full-time cybersecurity team that not only works with our clients to protect the confidential information, but is constantly training our people to prevent them from doing things that can have a negative impact on us all.
Let me follow up on that with a question that's not reflected here, but you just caused to be presented in my mind. Are there other lines of business, other service offerings, other platforms that you see the EPC industry taking that maybe 10 years ago weren't even thought of, such as your cybersecurity team to help protect data or to train your people on how to protect data with their customers? What are the types of service lines may be emerging here?
I think sustainability is a big area for that kind of investment. I think there's a lot going on, and I know the Autodesk and Procore folks are here, and they have a lot to say about answers to this question as well. I think, and others here, the technology side of things is really going to be impactful, especially as we move to more of a manufactured type of delivery approach.
How do we fit the numbers and the talent of labor management needed into a cost structure that will feed the industry the resources needed?
Interesting question.
We've got several votes, too. And so at this point, what I'm supposed to do is talk about the question a little bit in order to give the speaker
a few time to think about it
to gather his thoughts. But since Ben's pretty sharp on his feet, I'll not do that, which I just did.
Look, we're right now, I guess where the question comes from, right now we're throwing money at it, right? To get labor on site, I have projects, we run in 58 hours a week, every week, right? To the point where we have people saying enough, I don't want that much overtime. When we look at we're all competing for each other with the same level for talent, and it's just getting more and more expensive. So I think really we have to show ourselves as being an exciting place to be, make it a workforce environment where we can attract people and get more productivity there. Really show folks that, the top engineering talent wanted to go work for Google and do software engineering. How do we show them that working with us and the engineering they can do, maybe even on behalf of those hyperscale clients, would be a great opportunity. I think we have some work to do there. And that's as much as I can come up with in the 30 seconds that Greg bought me.
So what role do the lawyers and the legal community play in helping us fairly allocating risk and being more collaborative. After all, weren't they the perpetrators, the key perpetrators in creating the chaos that we all live in?
Well, that's not a leading question at all. And we're being recorded here. Look, I think it's not fair to blame the legal community for some of the challenges we have. I think where a lot of that rests is with us as business leaders who don't understand the implications or don't try to understand the implications of the language that our lawyers, their advice is do this will protect you as much as possible. But while it does protect us as much as possible, there's such a thing as so much protection that you can't actually function. And that's what we as business people need to do and take responsibility for and say, yeah, I could, I have a lawyer came to us and said, we talked about force majeure, and we identified pandemics as a force majeure item, and the lawyer said, you got to take that out. Well, why? He said, well, we've been through a pandemic. You know what to do. You can manage that risk. Great. So now we're going to take responsibility for any pandemic that comes down the line. That's not something beyond our control. And the good news is, in that case, the business people said, stop. That's not reasonable to ask these people to do. That's not a reasonable risk for ask these people to take. Right? So I say, the legal folks are doing their job. We need to do ours, and this will work out better.
Good response. Workforce development obviously is a necessity, and the crisis is obvious in the lack of numbers of available young workers. Between now and adequately supplying our workforce, how are you doing more with less? How does Turner strategize to do more with less using the current workforce?
First of all, we are collaborating with our trade partners and organized labor to figure out how to be as efficient and effective as possible with the folks that we have. Really creating an environment where people can be safe and productive. That's the first thing. The second thing we're really looking at is what are these alternative delivery models? It starts with sort of near-site prefabrication. Maybe we can be a little more productive. It's easier to make something right here than it is to make something up there. So let's do that first. And then we're moving more and more to looking, and this is where the enabling technologies, like, I know Autodesk does a lot on this, is as we get better and better at understanding what the products are, we can integrate the products, we can make them elsewhere and bring them back. I've mentioned that quite a bit here because I don't think we can solve this without really getting into that world of really changing how we convert the sites to sites of assembly. To some extent, won't be 100%. The idea of the Legos and just that's not I don't think we're headed, but it'll be a combination of what's efficient to build in the field and what can we build elsewhere. I think that's a big way of dealing with the labor challenges.
There's two, Ben, that are kind of connected here together. I'm going to ask the first one. I think this is the logical sequencing. What are the primary enablers that owners should be investing in order to improve the probability of success for their projects? Where do you see owners' lack of investment play out into problems on capital projects?
I think it's investment in partnership, and somebody said it here. I think it was in a question, but a lot of it comes down to trust. You have to build a team that you can trust to act in your best interest and deliver your business outcomes. So how do you start the process early enough that you really feel that you can pull together a team that can do that for you? I think that would be one of the most significant things. And then I think the other thing is we're getting much better as an industry on business intelligence and information. We have so much information that we create and very little of it that we can access. So really understanding what are the meaningful things that we can access and use that for decision making. And I raised the point earlier about that on supply chain and market intelligence. We get together with 300 vendors a month just to have a conversation about where things are going, what risks do they see, and then we try and aggregate that, and then sharing that with our clients so that they can use that information to help make decisions is really important. And that's just one example of really mining the intelligence that's out there so that we can make good business decisions.
Another question is that contractors are increasingly become coaches and mentors to uninformed owner buyers. If you are a consultant to the more mature owners, such as oil and gas, automotive, consumer non-durables, what key pieces of advice would you be giving them now in order to prepare for success in the future?
I'm going to ask you to read that again, mostly to buy me time.
Okay. It seems that contractors are increasingly becoming coaches and mentors to an uninformed owner buyer. Maybe they're new folks in the business, or they've got that one big mega project. This is editorial that they do once in a lifetime. If you were to give advice to the more mature owner communities, such as oil and gas, automotive, consumer non-durable, what are the 2 or 3 things that you would coach them to be aware of or to invest in order to improve their project success? Stale owner or well-established mature owners, what do they need to know to learn and grow?
Well, thank you for rereading the question.
Sure.
I'm a beneficiary of that, in that the data center world, most of our clients are serial builders. You know, if you look at it, we have the co-location market, which is sort of, we refer to that as sort of the spec office building of data centers. Then you have the big enterprise builders, and then you have the enterprise, you know, the one-off, somebody who's building a data center. They're a hospital and they're building a data center specifically for their needs. That data center, that hospital is our biggest challenge, right? Because they haven't built a data center in 20 years, and they're going to build this one, and they're not going to build another one for 25 years. We have to teach them everything. But those other serial builders, that's our bread and butter. And what that comes down to, again, relationship, information, really focusing on those things. And a lot of those clients, because their scale is so big, they have more than one contractor and more trade partner relationships than normal. Really, have you heard the term of cooperation? And we've seen more cooperation, you know, truly collaboration across GCs and across trade partners for our business partners, for our clients' outcomes. Those are the things to focus on, because those things move the needle.
A compliment by several folks. First of all, thank you, Turner Construction, for speaking up for skilled craftspeople, whether organized trades or open shop. Respect for them has been long overlooked, and we expect them to tolerate what is equivalent to third world conditions while expecting them to be at peak performance and totally safe and on their game and happy to work for us as contractors. Thank you for making a game change difference here. So that's a compliment. Sure, why not? Absolutely. Now, to follow up that question, when you're going to try to make a meaningful diversity or impact on diversity, how do you do it when we're beginning with a non-diverse industry, a shrinking industry? College grads are not pursuing construction and design degrees like they should. Certainly, high school grads are not going into the trades like we would have expected. And how do we expect to make a meaningful impact on diversity when there's not much there to work with? Thoughts?
Yeah, well, we kind of did this to ourselves, and there's other experts in this room, but we killed our VOTEC capacity starting in the 1970s, right? We just, hey, everybody should go to college. I think the good news is people are questioning that, right? And not everybody thinks that a college career and a college investment is the first and only thing you should do. I will tell you, when we go to recruit, and again, other people in the room know this much better than I, but sometimes we're talking more to the parents than we are the kids, right? To convince them that their kids really should have the opportunity to do this. I think the way we're going to get and solve this is as a full partnership of everybody involved. If standing side with sources of labor, standing side by side with teachers, owners coming to the table as part of this. I just got off a call this morning. We were talking about going to the NSBE conference and having clients be part of we're going to recruit, but have some of our clients in the room with us, because some of them are really excited. Our clients are more exciting than we are, to be honest. But having our clients in the room saying, wow, you can actually work for us by working for them, is part of how we get folks into the industry. And I'll say this workforce development aspect, it's like safety. There can be no intellectual property. We have to share everything we have and work together to solve this.
20 years ago, we would have been having owners talk about their contractors of choice, contractor pre-qualification, safety performance, workforce quality, schedule, et cetera. Today, we're hearing more and more about contractors talking about owners of choice. They seem to be in the driver's seat. Am I right?
What was the last part of that?
Am I right? Are contractors more discriminating with the clients that they choose to work with? 20 years ago, owners were on the pyramid, at the top of the pyramid, and they were trying to pre-qualify the contractors that they would let in the front door. Thoughts about that flip?
I think, yes. I mean, we're more discerning. The industry, I think the complexity of the projects really is the issue. What we're taking on is so massive that everybody has to be engaged in the partnership, and you can't, that paradigm has changed a little bit. When you're talking about those really big projects, everybody has to be aligned or they won't succeed. And I think that's maybe what you're feeling. Owners still control the process. There's no question about that. But I think it is more open and collaborative than it's ever been.
We have way more questions than we have time for. In fact, we're just about out. So one final question. What kinds of new training are you providing your senior project managers, superintendents, et cetera, that perhaps you did not provide 20 years ago?
I'll answer that one a little different, because something I'm really, really excited about is we're working. One of the things we've realized as we try and talk about the right environment and creating the right respectful workplace, the people who our craft people follow are their crew leaders, right? And they don't care. I mean, I can get up in front of, you can all be construction workers, and I can get up here and talk, and you'll nod, and then you'll grab your tools and go to work, and you won't really care what I said. If I was your trade partner leader, you may not care what it said. But if your crew lead gets up here, you care. What we realized is we haven't done a great job of taking our expectations and working with our labor partners to make sure they understand that, so the crew leads can get the training they need and really be able to talk about even the softer issues. So what we're trying to do now is work in collaboration and bring the training to those crew leads so that we can tackle this issue 5 or 10 people at a time and not try and do it at a job site at a time. And making sure the crew leads know what the expectations are, and even train our own people so they are clear on what our expectations are for those crew leads. We've never done this before, and it's really exciting, and it's so far been pretty rewarding.
Outstanding. That's a nice high point. Ben, thank you very much. Peter Davern would be very pleased. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred.